Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome once again to the United Regional Chamber's weekly update. We try to bring you on some interesting guests and some interesting subjects. And today I get to bring on my very first guest that I ever had on this show many years ago, Mr. Zach Patton. Zach, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Jack. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be back.
Yes. Zach is the owner and principal at Oak Grove Insurance. And we're just going to talk a little bit today, with the cold weather and stuff coming and insurance rates going crazy everywhere. We're hoping that Zach can give us a little bit of insight on what's going on. So, Zach, many homeowners are seeing their insurance premiums rise, even though there's never had to file a claim. In layman's terms, what's causing that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jack. It's a question that we're getting a lot, both from our clients as well as from other homeowners that we're talking to every day. They're seeing their home renewals come in higher than normal. It's normal to see a little bit of an increase from year to year to match inflation, but some of the jumps that people have been experiencing are more significant than what they've seen in the past. So, what it really comes down to is ever since the beginning of COVID, we're talking like 2020 here, there has been a pretty substantial increase in both the cost of construction materials as well as the cost of labor. This has really driven the amount that, or it has driven an increase in the amount that insurance companies have been paying out when a claim does occur. So if you think about like a house fire or a water damage claim for a burst pipe, something along those lines, companies on average are paying quite a bit higher now than they were just 5 years ago. So they're adjusting their prices accordingly to be able to account for that. The easiest way that a consumer can kind of see this, and it's not directly correlated, but it does give us an indication as to what's going on, is the massive change in home prices. Everyone's experienced the increase in the real estate prices and they've seen it. It's higher than, or the rate of increase has been higher than what is typical. And many of the factors impacting the real estate market are similarly impacting the insurance market as well.
And as you mentioned, with the cost of goods and services, with the construction industry, that's what's boosted up the cost. Well, if someone feels that their premium jump is unfair, what's the first thing they should do to understand before reacting or shopping purely on price?
Sure. Yeah, it's another great question, and a question that we get a lot. So I think whenever someone sees that price jump, their initial reaction is, I'm paying too much and I need to cut down the cost. And I would caution people to just try and go out and search for something that is less expensive, because ultimately what that home insurance policy is there for is to help you out on a bad day. It's supposed to help prevent your bad day from being the worst day of your life, right? Where you have a home loss or something like that. And now instead of insurance covering the costs, aside from your deductible, you're paying 10,000, 50,000, 500,000 out of pocket because you didn't have the right coverage in place to cover that loss. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that the coverages that you have on your policy are accurate to your home itself. Just like real estate prices have increased, the cost to replace a home has increased, and not all policies have kept up with those changes. So it's important to review that and make sure that that's accurate. Homeowners may have completed some updates to their home that would make them eligible for discounts that they were not previously eligible for. So, for example, if you've replaced your roof in the last couple of years, if you've made any major improvements to your heating system, your plumbing system, electrical system, you may be able to add some discounts to your policy. And there may be other changes that you can make to your existing policy to help bring down those costs before you go out and look to shop to find a different policy, or cut coverage. I wouldn't recommend that. The last option to look at, and this is especially good for people who are handy and can do some home projects themselves. Unfortunately, I'm not in that group. I need to hire people to help me with that. But they could look at increasing their deductible. So your home insurance is really designed to help you pay for major losses. Like we're talking about, like I've said, fire, water damage, that type of thing. It's not really designed to help you, let's say, replace a window, which is going to be somewhere between maybe 800, 1400, depending, for like a standard size window. That's roughly what it's going to be. So for those, you would want to pay out of pocket. You don't want to have to file that claim. So if you can handle that by yourself, that type of work, you could probably pretty comfortably raise your deductible if it's currently at 1,000 to 2,500 or even 5,000, depending on what level of carpentry and stuff like that you might be comfortable with.
Well, you mentioned if people are out shopping that they got to make sure that they get the right coverages, and some people have gaps in their coverage. What seems to be the most common coverage gap that you see homeowners in their policies today?
Yeah, so I actually had a call on this last week. We had a client who they're selling their home. They've moved out of the home; it's currently vacant, and they had a contractor come in. The contractor used a the restroom in the basement, and there was a malfunction with the plumbing, and it ended up flooding the basement. And everyone thinks that when you get a home insurance policy, it covers absolutely everything, and frankly, that's not quite true. In the event that you have a water-related loss due to a water sewer backup, so any of the drains in your home or the sewage outlet, so you may have like a clean out in your basement or something that you get sewage backed out of, um, you might not have coverage for that under a standard homeowners policy. You have to get an optional coverage added to it called an endorsement, the water sewage backup endorsement, to have coverage for that. So that's just one example. There's plenty of examples. It's really specific from house to house because houses are so different, communities are so different. So you might have a home that's on town water versus they have well water. Some homes have both. But all these different details about a home itself is going to indicate whether or not you should have certain types of coverages in place.
Well, is there a difference between people who have well water and use city water?
Yeah, so there is an option on most home insurance policies called service line coverage, which I think is incredibly important here in Massachusetts, just because of the age of our utilities. Um, and what service line coverage does for anyone who's on town water is the plumbing inside of your home is likely covered under your home insurance for most things that could occur. The city or the town is going to be responsible for the water up to the curb, but that plumbing that goes from the curb into your home underground is kind of a no man's land, but it is the responsibility of the homeowner. So if a tree root grows into that, or it becomes compacted, or if there's another issue where that pipe breaks, it typically costs about $10,000 to excavate that pipe and lay down a new pipe. And that is not covered on a standard homeowner's policy, but there's a type of optional coverage called service line coverage that you can add to most homeowners policies to get coverage for that. So someone who's on town water should certainly look into that. Someone who has a home that was built, let's say 1960s or earlier, very important that they have that because their utility line is probably quite old, and they should have that in case that pipe bursts. But even for newer homes too, we see that with tree roots growing into those newer lines and things like that of that nature as well. So, but that's just one of the differences between city water and well water. You wouldn't have that with a well water home.
Okay. Well, you and I have had many conversations, and you often explain insurance using real world cost rather than the industry jargon. Why do you think that approach resonates better with the consumers?
Well, quite frankly, consumers are not reading their insurance policies every day. They might use them to fall asleep at night, but they're not reading them to understand what the language is and what's happening there. They have many other things that they need to worry about and take care of. So we try to use language that's easy for people to understand and examples, real life examples that we've seen as an agency, because that's what people resonate with and that's what people understand. If I say to someone, just with the service line coverage example, do you have service line coverage on your policy? Nobody's going to understand what that means. If I say, do you know if you have an optional coverage on your policy for the water line that goes from the curb to your house? They're either going to say,
Makes more
I don't
sense.
know if I have that, or I should have that, or something along those lines. So it just makes it a lot easier for folks to understand and to make sure they have the right coverages in place on the policies that we're talking about.
Trying to deal and understand all those things, it's really hard. So, from your experience, what typically causes the most frustration for homeowners during a claim, for instance?
Claim, yeah. So with claims, they're frustrating from the get because you go from, if it's home insurance or auto insurance or whatever it may be, you have a working home, a working kitchen, a working car, and now all of a sudden it's not working. You had plans for it, maybe for your home you were going to have company over, you're just trying to cook in your kitchen, or with your car you're just trying to get to work or commute or bring the kids where they need to be. So it's just frustrating from the get. And most people want everything fixed immediately. Like they want their car in the shop today, to have the mechanic working on it today. And that is what the hope is, but it's not a realistic timeline. So I think the most frustrating thing for most people is just managing expectations. They upfront, they're not really told, what to expect in terms of how long a claim could take, depending on the type of claim that it is, the number of parties that get involved. So for physical damage claims, like a claim to a house where you damage to your home, typically the insurance company needs to send someone out to inspect, to make sure that, to validate that the damage is there, do an initial assessment. You as the homeowner need to hire a contractor to come out, or contractors, depending on how much damage there is. So it can take a while before everything is repaired to the way that it should be. And it's added stress depending on the time of the year, especially right now. If someone has a claim, it's just, mountains of stress on already what can be a very stressful time of year.
Yeah, because trying to get a hold of any type of a contractor right now is mission impossible. They're
It
all
is
pretty jammed
certainly.
up. In your experience, how often do claim issues come down to the misunderstanding rather than negligence?
So claim issues almost always come down to misunderstanding of the policy rather than negligence. Very rarely does someone intentionally try to not have a certain type of coverage, or say that they don't want anything covered. Like most people, when they get an insurance policy, or they're reaching out to get an insurance policy, their expectation or their assumption is that it covers everything, and that's not true. So for someone who might be shopping, for example, online for insurance, they might assume that their home insurance is going to cover everything, because a lot of the data pre-populates in whatever it is that they're looking at, and they buy, and then they have a claim and they find out home insurance doesn't actually cover everything. So it's usually a communication issue that comes up at some point in time. We spend a lot of time talking to potential clients about, hey, this is the way your home policy works. This is everything that a home policy typically covers. This is everything that a home policy typically does not cover, based on factors that are specific to your home or specific to you and your lifestyle. These are the optional coverages that we recommend, and here's why. And we spell it all out to them, which I think is the best way for people to understand, what they might be taking a risk on, or what they are comfortable taking a risk on when it comes to setting up their insurance policies.
All right. Well, to get back on the claims thing for a minute, what
Mhm.
are a few things homeowners can do today to reduce the chances of surprises if they ever need to file a claim?
Sure. So let's talk about like things they can do for the home as opposed to coverage stuff. Because for
Yes.
coverage stuff, they should talk to a licensed agent who can review everything and understands the language and that type of thing of what they're looking at. So for a home in the Northeast, the most common type of home insurance or home loss is a water related claim. And there's a lot of different ways that can happen. So right off the bat, we're going to exclude flood. Flood is a different type of policy. It is not included under a home insurance policy. You have to purchase that separately. But things that people can look at to help prevent these water related losses, the obvious ones are, make sure that your heating system is up to date and running. So have your annual maintenance or whatever maintenance schedule you're on for your heating system. Make sure that you're doing that, so you can avoid frozen pipes. There's a lot of great products out right now for uh, leak detection, where you would have a plumber come in and they'd install this on the main, and it would tell you, or it would program itself, so that way if it detects that there's a leak somewhere in your pipe system, it will actually shut off the main, to prevent any more water from coming out and causing any more damage.
All right. Well, as people are starting to shop around a little bit, what questions do you think a homeowner should feel comfortable asking any insurance professional, regardless of who they work with?
Yeah, well, they should ask them. So for an independent agent, and there's two types of agents: there's independent and captive. For an independent agent, they should ask them what companies they're working with and what their financial ratings are. So you want to be mostly with home insurance providers that are A minus or above in terms of the AM Best right, excuse me, AM Best rating. You want to understand, what their philosophy is in terms of insurance recommendations. So are they an order taker? Are they someone where if you say, hey, I need a home insurance policy, I want to pay as little as possible, the agent says, yep, we do that. Here you go. Or are they someone who's more of a consultant? They view themselves more as like almost like your relationship that you would have with a CPA or with a family attorney, where they're looking at things for you with some level of regularity, and they're more of a partner in making sure that you have the protections that you need. They're comfortable having what might be a tough conversation around, hey, I know you have a budget for insurance for this, but for your protection, to make sure you're actually protected and not having to pay like $100,000 out of pocket down the road in the event of a claim, you need to pay a little bit higher than what you've been budgeting for.
All right, so actually, you almost answered my next question. How can consumers tell the difference between insurance advice that is meant to educate versus advice that is just meant to sell?
Yeah, my personal opinion is that if someone is or there's messaging out there that's based on fear, like, you need to do this or it's going to be calamitous. You need to do this or, you could lose everything. Like, and that's the only messaging that's there, that is based on fear. And that's just a sales tactic to scare you into getting a certain type of insurance policy or something like that. I think the best way to really understand if someone is taking that consultative approach is if they're letting you know, hey, we do things this way because this has been in our experience. And I'm happy to share with you story after story after story of what these experiences have been, what the results are, how people have been impacted by that, how someone has either been protected by this insurance coverage or they've been hurt by not having the insurance coverage. And they're ultimately leaving that decision up to the consumer, saying, this is why I recommend it based on, cost benefit or whatever it may be. This is what you should have in place. But bringing it from a perspective of, it's ultimately your decision on what you want, what you would like to do. I'm just here to consult and advise.
And you are an independent agent. Tell us about
Correct.
Oak Grove Insurance.
Sure. So Oak Grove Insurance was founded just before COVID. I was working from home before working from home became much more common with everybody. We primarily help families and businesses throughout Massachusetts and Rhode Island. I myself have been in insurance since 2008, helping families and small businesses in Massachusetts and beyond. And most of the clients that we work with are homeowners. Most of them have multi-generational households. So they either have adult children living in the household with them, or they have elderly parents living in the household with them. And they often have more complex insurance needs. So they've got, 3, 4 cars in the household. Maybe they have a vacation home or a secondary home, rental property. They might own a small business. So there's more things that they need to make sure they're fully protecting against. But we help everybody. So, I mean, even someone who just has one car and that's all they need to insure, we can help them as well.
All right, as we get to the close, any final thoughts for our group?
Well, I'd just like to reiterate, I think that we've kind of been programmed by commercials and stuff like that to think of insurance as a commodity, because they're telling us, you need to save, you need to save, you need to save. But when push comes to shove, if there is a claim, which I hope no one ever has a claim and they don't have to use their insurance, but if there ever is a claim, no one in that moment is saying, thank goodness I saved 15% by making that 15-minute phone call and reducing my coverages.
Right.
They're all, you want to work with someone who you're comfortable with, who's going to be responsive to your needs, who's going to be responsive in the event that, the worst day arrives, your house burns down, you get into a car crash, whatever it may be. So, you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself. And It might not be the absolute cheapest, but you shouldn't be getting the absolute cheapest. You should be really protecting your largest assets and your financial future.
And that's where this consultative approach comes in, where you get to learn more about your clientele.
Exactly.
Well, Zach Patton from Oak Grove Insurance, thanks for joining me today on the show. We truly appreciate it. Big shout out to Jim Jones and the team over there at AACS who put up with me every week. We truly appreciate you guys. And folks, we won't be having anything next week because it is Christmas Eve. So we wish everybody happy, merry, all that good stuff. And please stay safe.